Hello, siblings and cousins. It's another edition of I Got a Lot of Things to Say. I'm your host, Kea Dodson, and today I'm with my co host, Brandon, and we are going to be talking about election predictions. As you know, every House seat is up for re-election. There's about 100 Senate seats up for re-election. And there's a couple of states that we didn't think were going to be toss-ups that are now toss-ups. Hey, Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing really well this morning. Excited to jump into these maps and yeah, I'm doing well. We're optimistic. I'll say that.
I hope so. I hope we are optimistic. So, I think we talked about this when we did our episode on the DNC convention, and we talked about what we thought were toss up states. North Carolina now is the toss up. I think we said Florida, when we
Yes,
had that
I
episode.
definitely right now I definitely believe, everything coming out of North Carolina is pointing to victory for Democrats. But because it has been historically Republican, they're
Hmm.
counting it as a toss up for sure. In Florida for sure. I mean, everyone's talking about it, right? We've been talking about
Right.
it for a little bit of time, and now the mainstream media is finally seeing what the rest of us have been seeing. So,
Right.
as far as Ohio's concerned for me, I definitely think it's a state to watch, and I think it's a state that if there is a state that's going to flip, it's definitely going to be Ohio. But I'm not necessarily comfortable making that my final prediction just yet. And what's the beauty in the map that we have and that mainstream media is also agreeing with is that Kamala Harris has many paths to victory. And so I think that's one thing that we need to, remember here is that while she may not win in every single state, there's plenty paths to victory. So, yeah, I'll be quiet now and let you jump in.
I was watching the news yesterday. I tend to only watch the news on the weekends and only certain anchors. And I think they were talking about how she has like a 21-point lead. I forgot which demographic it was. I don't know. I think it was women. Which I was like, good,
Mm-hmm.
yay. I'm still kind of pessimistic about the whole thing. It doesn't mean that I don't want her to win. I absolutely want her to win. But I feel like this is a little 2016 deja vu, where we were like, oh yeah, I mean, this time in 2016, I just knew that Hillary was going to win because I was just like, Trump is an unserious candidate. I do feel that there are a lot of people who were like, oh, Trump absolutely is an unserious candidate, and I'm not going to vote for that person. But we also don't have the January 6th either. So I'm just
Right.
afraid that they are really working behind the scenes to try to steal it. And I mean, they've all but said that, basically. They're trying to get laws to steal it. I think that Nebraska, where they wanted to change it to a winner take all, and the judge was like, no, we're not going to do that. So
Right. It was the
while,
judge and the senators too, luckily.
yeah, and they were like, nah, we're not doing that. And so I'm optimistic, but I'm
Cautiously
tempering
optimistic.
it. Yes, I couldn't think of the name. I couldn't think of cautiously. I am cautiously optimistic because I somewhat don't believe in polls. Polls can tell you whatever you want. The people who take polls can tell you whatever you want. I've taken online polls and have lied because I'm like, this is of no consequence and I don't care. And other people will do that too. I haven't had a poll. No one, a pollster hasn't called me. And I don't have a landline anymore, so pollsters don't really call me. So I'm just kind of like poll schmoll. And I also took statistics, and you can manipulate a poll to say whatever it is you want. You also have to look at the sample size of the poll too. I take all of that stuff in consideration. I'm just like, poll. But let's get started. What's your prediction for, I guess, Congress? Because that's just as important as the presidential race.
Sure. I think we're going to take the House. I really don't have any doubts about taking the House. I haven't really heard many folks talk about this, but, the congressional majority that Republicans have was only about 7 seats in 2022. That is only like one now, right? Due
Mm-hmm.
to Congress people resigning, due to losing elections, special elections, ethics investigations, indictments. And they're all the Republicans. I think there's been one Democrat who said that they're going to
Yeah.
retire. They're in a safe, they're in a safe district. So that's not the concern. But my point is that a lot of those districts that held the majority were in New York, right? There
Mm-hmm.
was a few Republicans that were added in New York because they were able to gerrymander some districts. There's also a couple that were added here in Arizona because of gerrymandered districts. Now, what I've been able to follow is the New York cases. Those districts are no longer gerrymandered in favor of Republicans. Also, even
Mm.
if they were, New York Republicans have done a really good job showing how loyal they are to MAGA. And typical everyday New York Republicans aren't that way. And so I see a lot of favor for Democrats in the congressional map. I'm not as confident in the Senate map. Which is just as important, I'm very, very confident in the Senate race in my state, in Arizona, with Ruben Gallego against Kerry Lake. I
Mm-hmm.
have no doubts there. Ruben Gallego is not just. I like to point to polling because I do believe that state internal polling on our Senate races, on our gubernatorial races, and our congressional races, they've been very accurate. Now, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a different ball game when you're talking about an electoral map for presidential races. I don't trust that polling either, but for our state internal polling, I trust that polling. And I mean, she's losing by it's 40-60, right? That she's losing by. And she's already lost campaigns here in the state, just to speak to, the details of this particular race. And furthermore, he's got the endorsements of police unions. He has the endorsements of the majority of the labor unions here in the state. And I think the most important endorsements are the tribes, the indigenous tribes. He has earned the endorsement of the Navajo Nation, and the Navajo Nation was instrumental to delivering victory for President Biden in
Mm-hmm.
2020.
So I'm sorry to cut you off because you didn't say names. So who are you talking about in the Arizona Senate race for people who may not follow?
Sure. So our Arizona Senate race, Democrat Ruben Gallego is
Mm-hmm.
running to fill the seat that is being left empty by Democrat turned independent Kirsten Sinema.
Right.
Republican challenger Kerry Lake is also running against Ruben Gallego. Kerry Lake is a former broadcast news journalist, local Fox News anchor here, turned, a MAGA loyalist.
Mm-hmm.
And he's already lost elections here in the state. And Ruben's won elections and is a proven leader, Army veteran. He's set to win. I'm very sure. I'm very sure of that. When I
And
Go ahead.
oh, just to let everyone know, because a lot of people don't know this, I am registered to vote in the District of Columbia. We are not a state. We don't have a senator. I do not ever vote for a senator because we don't have one because we don't have representation in Congress. I do vote for a representative. I've voted for this woman since I could vote. Her name is Eleanor Holmes Norton. She pretty much runs unopposed on the Democrat side, and she pretty much wins against the Republican because, again, we're not a state and we are very heavily blue. So I just want to put that out there. It sounds like I don't know much about the Senate. It's because we don't, as a District of Columbia resident, we don't have a senator. We don't get to pick one. We also don't get to elect our judges. Our judges are appointed. That's another thing that makes us different. So when you guys talk about voting, you guys who live in states, you vote for judges, you vote for sheriffs. You're going to be voting for senators, representatives. If you're in the District of Columbia, you're not voting for a sheriff or a judge. You are voting for council members. You are voting for House of Representatives, and you're voting for president. That's and any initiatives that we have on the ballot. I don't think we have any. I could be wrong, but I don't think we have any this year. We had one during the midterm, but I don't think we have one this year. But I just wanted to point that out for everybody. Sorry.
Absolutely. No, don't be sorry. It's so important, and speaking to, the length of the ballot, here in Arizona, they're telling us that this is the first year that we're going to have 2-page ballots front and back. And the reason for that is because the Republican legislature is throwing ballot referendums on there to confuse people away from voting in favor of the abortion amendment and in favor of, there's a couple referendums on there that would give the state legislature a hell of a lot more power than what it needs. But they're throwing they're throwing a bunch of shit against the wall and see what will stick. And luckily, Democratic PACs here in the state have been doing a really good job educating people about this. And so we know what we have to vote for. Arizona, I don't know how other states do things, but our Supreme Court is not elected, but it kind of is elected. Our governor appoints the Supreme Court justices, and then there are 2-year terms. And every 2 years, we have the ability to vote to either retain them or replace them. And if we vote to replace them, then the governor just appoints a new one. This year, this election cycle, we have 2 Supreme Court justices that are MAGA loyalists, voted to uphold the 1864 abortion ban that was enacted before Arizona even had statehood. And so there's a large movement here, Democratic activist movement and information campaign to ensure that their seats are not retained, giving Katie Hobbs, one of the first Democratic governors we've had in a very long time, the opportunity to appoint Supreme Court justices for the state. So very important that, Arizonans especially, because not only because it's a swing state and, our electoral votes could help determine the White House, but there's so many things on our ballot referendums and on our ballots that are very important.
I think they're doing something like that too in Florida, where they're trying to confuse people on the ballot about their abortion laws too. So it would behoove everyone that lives in a state where abortion is on the ballot to really read thoroughly the ballot and make sure you are checking what you need to check. Because one thing that I have noticed since we have elected Trump as president is that the GOP is not against cheating, either overtly or subtly, to get into the White House. And that seems just really it's undemocratic, really. But it also speaks to they have no policies. And the policies that they do have seem to be not very popular. Like if you have to go to these types of lengths to put something on the ballot that you believe in, you have to cheat, then maybe you need to rethink the policies that you do have. But it seems like the GOP policy is Trump. They don't really have a policy. That's all it is Trump and
whatever Project 2025 tells him to do.
And Project 2025, which a lot of people don't like, but they don't seem to care. So I wanted to thread something yesterday and I deleted it. And the thread was pretty much like, I don't understand how Trump has a hold on the GOP, because every time I hear something about the GOP and Trump, it always seems like the GOP as a whole don't want to do it, but they're just going along with it because of Trump. And
Yeah.
maybe I'm missing something, but I don't understand how someone who just carries 30% of your base has all of this control over a party, and y'all don't even want him in there anyway.
Right. I think they're obviously, now a few of his loyalists, I truly believe he has dirt on, and he's blackmailing them. I don't know what he could have. I don't know what he could have on Lindsey Graham that the rest of us don't already know.
I think that's it. I think that
Right.
is what he has. But Lindsey Graham is what? Tennessee, Kentucky?
South
What state
Carolina.
is Lindsey Graham?
South
I'm thinking of
Carolina.
Mitch McConnell. South Carolina.
Yeah, Mitch McConnell is West Virginia. Yeah.
So I think that's it. What Trump has on Lindsey Graham is a known secret, and I personally don't care. And I don't believe in outing people, but I don't care if that's what it is.
Well,
But I
and
feel like
I
people
don't
in
even know
South
if it's a,
Carolina might
I
care.
don't even know if it's an outing thing. They will care. You know what I'm saying? They definitely
They will
will care,
care.
and that's the thing. I mean, it's literally everyone but the religious elite that he gains his power from in South Carolina. And those people, those white religious elite people, I don't even know if they would care. I think we're at the stage in America where it's going to be a huge shift. And they're losing power, and they recognize that. I mean, you got to think about it this way: if North Carolina, and I talk about the South really as a whole a lot of times, right? And while the South has every right for us to speak about its individual states, there's still a culture there, right?
Hmm.
And the South as a whole, in 2020 in Georgia, they sent a black man and a Jewish man to the Senate. In the
They
post
did.
antebellum South, that shook something up, right? And now in North Carolina, they're about to send another Jewish man
Hmm.
to the top office there in the state. And I think it's very funny that they are willing to put a complete moral contradiction up in power as long as he can maintain their status quo, but they won't put they don't, actual family values. Like Josh Stein is a good person. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
But just because he's a Democrat, they don't want that, and they're willing to stand behind Mark Robinson. It speaks to I think it's to the power, and the powers at play,
But the,
right? They are
but
so
here's
afraid of
but here's
losing power.
but here's the thing about Mark Robinson though, is that from what I've been seeing on the reporting of Mark Robinson, outwardly they are supporting him. But internally they are like, you need to drop out, you need to drop out, you need to drop out. But outwardly, appearance wise, they're supporting him while simultaneously trying to get him to drop out. It's like they're giving lip service, but they're not giving
Right,
anything else to him. And I find that to be, well, I think that's just life. And this is something I've always struggled with, the appearance of something versus just doing or being that something. So
right, right.
it's the appearance of we're going to stand behind Mark Robinson, but you really aren't standing behind him.
No, no. And they did the same, and I think why this imploded the way that it did on such a greater scale, because I forget his name, but who was running against a Reverend Warnock?
Walker.
Herschel Walker. This is blowing up bigger than Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker may have had some abortions, but he, it didn't come out that he was screwing his sister-in-law with feces and piss play, and is calling himself a black Nazi. That's the nitty gritty that the news isn't reporting, but you'll find on social media. If you heard CNN's Jake Tapper many times say there are things we cannot discuss on television, that's a part of the things that you can't discuss on television. Right. He was screwing his
Ooh.
sister-in-law while married to his wife, and they were playing in scat. They were involved in their scat kink. And while watching transgender porn. And I don't have
I
a
don't want to
problem.
make
Here's the thing, the trans community throughout this whole debacle has really taken a blow, right? Because
yes.
they become the epicenter of political attacks anytime conservatives are found out to be a part or engaging in LGBT activities. You know what I'm saying? And so I don't have like him looking at trans porn isn't the problem. Him
Right.
advocating the death of trans people and he actually advocated that trans people should not be able to, they should have to use the bathroom in public. And that takes a whole new hit now that we found out what he likes to do behind closed doors.
But isn't that really kind of what we've always known about the overtly religious, the conservative group? They want you to not do the things that they do under the cover of night.
Oh,
which,
absolutely. Absolutely.
and
What
my
comes
thing
to
is,
mind for me is the old literature phrase, she doth protest too much, methinks. You
yes.
know, she protests too much. You know, it's always the ones who are holding the signs on the street corners and yelling the loudest that are the biggest perverts.
And I'm just like, if we would just get away from that. I had said something on Threads, and this is kind of how I live my life. And I said this on Threads. I may have said it more than once, but I'm a Christian and I do believe in heaven and hell. God already knows my heart. When people say that, well, God knows my heart. Well,
Yeah,
guess what? God knows that I don't really like you. God knows that I don't care. God knows all of this. And if I'm supposed to be doing everything and thinking all of these things for God's favor, and God already know Kia don't care, I'm not going to sit there and pretend with people that have no say of whether I get into heaven or not. Because
right.
technically you have no say. You have
No.
no say of whether I get into heaven or not. God has the say of whether I get into heaven. And if God already know that Kia don't care and Kia ain't gonna fake it for nobody, I'm not faking it for you either. And
Right.
so I guess my thing is God already knows you're doing it. And if you believe that God thinks that what you're doing is a sin and you are still doing it, to me, one or two things is going on. You actually don't believe in God and don't believe in hell, or you think by some cognitive dissonance that God can't see what you're doing. And so you don't believe in the dogma you claim to be an adherent to. So it's like if God knows that you did this. So you lying to me about I can't get you into heaven. So why
Right.
you like Kia? I didn't do that. Okay, I don't care if you did it or not. I got no say whether you go to heaven or not. Although Catholics do believe that we can pray people to heaven. And so I do whenever I see a funeral procession, I have a little prayer where I pray the soul to heaven. But for the most part, besides that, I ain't got nothing to do with how
Right.
you get to heaven or whether you go to hell or not. You do. You and
Right.
your relationship with God.
Sure.
Or you think that, well, God's going to forgive me for this. Okay, well, if God's going to forgive you for that, God's going to forgive the other person that you said was bad for doing it too.
Well, and I don't know. It's so funny because we just watched the me and Nate just watched on Hulu the latest or the newest Omen movie.
Hmm.
Right. And the whole idea is, the Catholic Church is trying to usher in the Antichrist to bring people back to the church. Right. That's the premise of the movie. And they do all these evil things, right? Torture, rape, murder, all this shit in order to achieve that. And I think it's just a tale of the time, right? Like, you have the GOP doing all of these things. I don't think, again, what he does with his wife is his business. What he does with his sister-in-law
Right.
is his business, right? His sexual proclivities are none of my business, but you don't get to scream family values while you're participating in this stuff,
Absolutely.
while also creating domestic terrorism in the country, generate enough fear so that you can maintain power.
Right.
It's wild to me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do. It's anti-American. Maybe it's very American. I don't know. But my idea of what America, what it's supposed to be, in theory, it's anti-American. And I don't understand why they just can't look to the conservative parties in the UK and the conservative parties in Europe. They had to change eventually if they were going to remain relevant. And I feel like if the GOP would just kind of change its platform, you know what I'm saying? Stop trying to kill gay people. Stop being fucking racist as shit. Like, talk about actual conservative ideologies, whatever those look like. I don't really know. I'm a Democrat.
Right. I don't know what those look like either.
I don't know. Like, I don't believe we necessarily need a conservative movement, but I do believe for democracy to work, we need an opposition movement. And I think that that's going to, have to look different. And I think that that needs to be obviously redefined for, the conservative independents and Democrats. We have to redefine. Okay, well, we need to move farther to the left. If they're all moving this way, we need to move farther to the left.
Right. Right.
if we're going to go forward. But
Exactly. Because I guess my bone of contention right now with, and I wish the election was tomorrow so we could just get it over with,
same.
is we're courting Republicans, which on its face, I don't have a problem with. But I do have a problem when we're courting them over people in our own party. I
Yeah.
think that's where I'm just like, I don't have a problem with you courting Republicans, but court them like, hey, this is our party and this is what we're about. And if you want to do it, get on. But you really should be courting and taking
Right.
care of people in your own party that feel like they are being alienated. Because now what you're doing is you're alienating people that have voted for you and gave you votes for another group of people. This may be the first time they're voting for a Democrat, or they don't historically vote
Right. And that
Democrat.
for a very long time, the Black community, the Latino community, the gay community, these are backbones of the Democratic Party, right? That they couldn't win elections without, and they're just kind of
Agreed.
they're not doing anything for it. That they're very busy courting the Liz McCain, Adam Kinzinger, John McCain types.
Right.
And I don't, John McCain's cool, but he's not a Republican. I mean, he's not a Democrat. He wasn't a Democrat. He's a liberal Republican. We could be in the same room.
Yeah, I would say he's a
We
liberal
could be in the
Republican.
same room. I didn't have like that. But like, is he ideal? No. That's not like. Would I vote for him over Trump? Yes, but can we get out of this idea of politics, right? Like, I want to move to where we're not always comparing politicians to the MAGA movement.
Right.
Right? Like,
And I guess,
you don't have to be
and I
very
guess,
good in order to be better than MAGA. Like,
right. And I think that's for me, that's where my disconnect with why haven't the Liz Cheneys and the Adam Kingsenters just take their party back? Like, I think that's what it is for me. It's like, okay, I understand you're voting for Harris, and that's great and all. Woo woo.
right.
But why are you just letting your party do
Well,
this?
and to me, it feels like they're refugees that don't want a home other than ours. Like, I don't know.
The problem with you wanting a home,
I just,
I don't have a problem with you wanting a home at the
you can't
Democratic
redecorate
base.
my house.
I don't have a problem with that. But what I have a problem with is you can't come in and, like you said, you can't come in and decorate my house though.
Don't move the shit in the kitchen. You know what I'm saying? Don't
And
move it.
and
Rearrange
I
my kitchen.
feel like by courting them, we kind of move more to the center or more to the right, which is why I think I said the DNC is about to have their own implosion in the next couple of years. If we keep operating in the way that we're operating, we're going to splinter too, because you're going to have people that's like, I am not center. I am not center left. I am more left. And as I see what I believe in get pushed aside, and it's always pushed aside, well, it's not right. We need to win. We need to win. We're always in survival mode. And at some point, we have to stop operating under survival mode and start operating from, okay, what do our constituents want?
Right.
And we don't do that. We always operate in survival mode. So when you operate in survival mode, you always think, well, this is more important than this. It may or may not be true, but we're going to splinter and have our own reckoning. I don't think it's going to be like MAGA, but I think we are going to splinter and we're going to have our own reckoning. I feel like within the next 10 years, if we make it that long, empires are only around for 250 years, and you know what 2026 what 2016 is, everybody? 150 years of the United States. So do with that information what you will. If we make it that long, I think we are going to see I don't think we're going to get rid of the Electoral College in 10 years, but I think we're going to see more of a push politically to get rid of it. Like, you're going to have a a a a, a good faith effort to try to abolish the Electoral College.
Well, and
And once that is,
let's look at. Have you looked at the Popular Vote Act? the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. So currently, I mean, we're kind of closer. It's gonna take some time. I feel that we're a little bit closer than that, but there's things that have to happen. I'm reading straight from Wikipedia. The National Popular Vote Interstate Compact is an agreement among a group of U.S. states and the District of Columbia toward all their electoral votes to whichever presidential ticket wins the overall popular vote in 50 states and the District of Columbia. So it would essentially just be a popular vote. We would go to popular vote, but but electoral votes have to get there. Does that make sense? In order for us to get there, there has to
Yes.
be enough states generate 270 electoral votes that vote for that and have passed that. So currently, where are we at?
And don't worry, guys, I'm going to be putting all of this
It was
in our
introduced
show
in
notes.
42 states in 2007. It passed by at least one legislative chamber in Arkansas, California, Colorado, Illinois, New Jersey, North Carolina, Maryland, and Hawaii. And so right now we're at 209 electoral votes. The states have signed on, and we need, 51 or no, excuse me, 9 from 70 or I'm not a math person, but we have 209, we need 270. And so I think that if we're pushing things in the right direction and we're making people aware of this, that we can get it done in maybe a decade. But also I think we're doing ourselves a very large injustice when discussing this and discussing wanting better options and discussing the duopoly of the two-party system and the powers that be there if we're not discussing ranked choice voting.
Agreed.
Ranked choice voting was, implemented in Alaska. It's how Democrats won a seat there by Democrat Congressperson Mary Pertola, I believe is her name. They implemented it there. New York has ranked.
I was about to say, New York has ranked choice voting.
Right. There are efforts here in Arizona to get it underway. It hasn't garnered enough signatures for a ballot referendum just yet, but in a couple of years, I think it will. They're hosting regular monthly meetings and they're getting a lot of exposure here in the state. And I'm for it. My studies of ranked choice voting and the political culture that it creates when you have to be a politician that wants to garner the majority of voters and then be ranked as first, second, third choice. You know what I mean? If you want to always be someone's second choice, you're not going to mudsling as much. You're also going to campaign very differently. You know what I mean? You're going to campaign very differently. If you want someone to put you as their second choice or first choice, whatever, the goal is to be first choice. So if you want to be someone's first choice, you're going to campaign differently. And we also, another thing, it sounds really big, but we got to end dark money in politics. We got to get rid of Citizens United. If we got rid of Citizens United, implemented ranked choice voting, and did a popular vote, Democrats or the Democratic establishment, and I'm not just meaning the DNC, I mean the ideals of democracy would always be alive, right? And I love doing it, but we wouldn't have to have these episodes where we're making predictions on what we think is going to happen. The only reason we're having to make predictions is because the fucking Electoral College. Let's be honest.
Right.
It would be very clear otherwise, right? And so, but I do believe that Democrats, will maintain the House. I think it's going to be very close in the Senate. We have to flip Florida if we're going to maintain control. We also have to maintain John Tester's seat,
right?
Which the media is saying, and polling is showing all of this, right? But the very weird thing about John Tester's state is that these people will vote for him and then also vote for Trump,
right?
They will. I've seen tons of videos where they're going around asking, 10, 12 people, do you think John Tester's right for this state? They say yes, and they're wearing Trump shirts at a Trump rally, saying they're going to vote for John Tester. So, John Tester's an old farm man. He's been there. He's been doing right by these people. right? And he's, he's worked with Trump for that state when Trump was in office, and he has a record of, positively working with the Republican administration to ensure that his state had the resources they needed for his most vulnerable populations, right? Democrats don't love him for that, but they love him now that we need his seat for the majority.
I mean, ideally, if we were working with a party that wasn't so cult-like, that's kind of what you want. And that's kind of how Congress operates. You have bills that have been co-sponsored, that have been sponsored by Democrats and co-sponsored by Republicans. Because, look, my constituents want this too. Let's work together to get it to happen. That's what's supposed to happen.
Right.
The problem we have now is you have a bunch of MAGA Republicans, and I'm going to say it. A lot of the MAGA Republicans in Congress really do not know what they're talking about, and they don't know how government works.
You're right.
And they think we're only supposed to work within ourselves, and we're not supposed to reach the aisle, and that's just not how it works. Marjorie Taylor Greene does not understand how government works. Tommy Tuberville does not know how government works. Jim Jordan does not know how government works. They got into office in the first wave of MAGA. They've done zero.
Right.
They've done zero but waste people's time, waste the taxpayers' money on conspiracy theories. They are literally listening to conspiracy theories and trying to do whatever with them. And they're making a mockery. They're making a mockery of democracy and of our
respected establishment
and of the establishment, and everyone is just sitting there like, whatever.
Well, and you also have, I think it's important to mention, you also have very, very astute Congress people on the Republican side, people like Tom Cotton, people like Josh Hawley, people like Ted Cruz that went to Ivy League universities. They know the truth. They know and they know how government works too. But they get on cable news and they push these narratives that, Joe Biden could do something, or that Kamala Harris could do something about the border as vice president.
I never heard of no vice president doing nothing about no border.
Right. I've never heard of no vice president doing anything at all. You know what I'm saying? Let's be honest.
Right.
Let's be honest. But they'll go on Fox News and they will play to the education deficiency of the electorate.
You're part of their... And honestly, if you're their electorate, you should be angry that they think so low of you and so low of your intellect that they will sit there and lie to you to your face.
Yes.
I know if my elected officials thought of me that lowly, I would be really upset and vote them out.
Well, absolutely.
Basically, what they're doing is they're saying you're not smart. They're saying you're not intelligent. They're saying you do not have the intellect to even grasp what we're trying to do.
Right. Well,
and some of them aren't.
You're right.
Some of them actually are intelligent.
You're right. Well, I mean, we've discussed this offline before, Kea, but, people voted for Marjorie Taylor Greene because they agreed with her, right? People voted for Lauren Boebert, because they agreed with her. And so there are people that, in America that Marjorie Taylor Greene and that Lauren Boebert reflect, right? They reflect these people. But they've tried this game in places, and, I alluded to it earlier, and I think we got off track, which happens, but Georgia's game with Herschel Walker and holding him up against Reverend Warnock, and I'm really quoting a pastor, or I'm paraphrasing what a black pastor in Atlanta said, but he told his congregation, he said the GOP thought that they could put the lowest caricature of what we thought a black man was, and that we would be fooled by that, right?
Right.
But when you hold him up against someone like Ralph Warnock, who he said is erudite, educated, and is a man of principle, he said they must think the Georgia electorate's real stupid. He said, and what he said is there aren't no slaves here anymore. They need to know that. We're not those people, right? And I think that that's exactly what they tried to do in North Carolina with Mark Robinson. They thought that the electorate,
Oh, absolutely.
black and white, but especially black, right, would look at Mark Robinson and see hope or something, you know?
No, they held up Mark Robinson and said this is a black person, and we all know that black people vote for black people, and that's not necessarily true.
Right.
We don't just vote for people because they're black. So, I mean, you literally did that out of your racist ideology. And you thinking that we could bring a black person, the black people will vote for him because he's black. We don't care what his political ideology is. They're going to vote for him because he's black. And all these white people are going to vote for him because he's black. And them voting for him just means they're not racist. I don't know of one black person that would sit there and vote for someone who calls themselves a black Nazi. I know I wouldn't.
I don't know any either.
When he opens his mouth and says some of the most vile things about his own people,
Right.
you really think we're going to vote for somebody who said we need to bring slavery back? Not understanding that he gonna be a slave too?
Yeah.
Do you really think we want to vote for someone who says he's a black Nazi, not understanding Nazis killed black people too?
Right. It's like, I think Ron Flipikowski, the editor at Midas Touch, said the other day, he said, it's like chickens for McNuggets.
Yes, I saw that. I saw that. I saw that.
It's chickens for McNuggets.
I saw that. And he made a really good point. It's
Right.
like, but they are so racist, and they think so low of us that they think this was perfect. This was a perfect thing. And you had all these black people going, I ain't voting for that man.
Right. I'm gonna vote for that Jewish man, that white cute little Jewish man that is the Democrat. That's who I'm voting for. That's what they're saying. Black voting for the Jewish man.
I'm not voting for this. This man is, first of all, there's a term we have for men like him. And when we saw him come up, just like we think of Tim Scott and Byron Donalds, you're cooning and you're a coon, and we don't vote for coons.
Right. I 100% understand the sentiment.
And the thing is, they don't understand that because they don't know no black people.
Right.
They don't know no black people. They don't hang out with black people. All the black people they do hang out with act like them because they just want to be close to whiteness, thinking that's going to save them. Ain't none of that going to save you.
Well, and that's not, I mean, we've discussed this before. That's not exclusive to the black community that
right.
wanting to be white adjacent and as close to whiteness or have aspirations to whiteness.
Absolutely. I'm sorry. I think the work assistant is trying to get in here. Keep talking.
Well, let him in.
No, it wasn't her. She upstairs.
Okay.
Yeah, she's upstairs. Anyway, yes, and it's like you said, it's not like you have people in the LGBTQ community, Latinos, Asians, Middle Easterns, you have everybody because they all think, well, if I align myself to whiteness, the leopards won't eat my face. The leopards will absolutely eat your face.
They're going to. They may not. They're not going to do it before you give them enough gas to eat everybody else. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But they're going to come for you eventually. And they always do. And we see it,
And we have historic records that they eventually come for you too. I don't understand. Everything old is new again. Right. Everything old is new again.
Yeah, well, there's the way my dad said it, there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new. That's the way he would have said it,
So to get back on track, okay, let's talk about Ohio a little bit.
Yeah.
I feel like the Haitian migrants in Ohio and have really changed, I feel, the political landscape in Ohio as a state. To where it wasn't necessarily a toss-up. We can now I think we can safely say it's a toss-up.
Yes.
How do we feel about it?
I'm not ready to say right now that it's going to flip. And I will say that the only reason I say that is because of the online sentiment that I get from people who say they live there, right? But I know that's only anecdotal.
Same.
right? I understand that that's only anecdotal, but because I feel as though there's been enough of that, it's not put me in a place like I am in Florida, right? I'm not. Here's what and let me look up. Let's look up Ohio voter registration
Yes.
by party, because I've got that for Arizona, I've got that for Florida. So let's look at Ohio. So there's a total of 8 million voters total as of 2024. A million of them are registered. 1.5 are registered Republicans.
Mm.
117,000 are registered Democrats, and there's 5 million unaffiliated voters.
Okay.
So looking at that, yeah, I don't have a problem saying that Ohio could probably flip. What I'm using when I'm looking at data, and I'm kind of, I'm not this original. I'm not a statistician, right? Like I'm also not a mathematician. Words are my forte, not numbers, right? But in Florida, you have 5.3 million registered Republicans, 4.3 million registered Democrats, and 3.5 million registered independents.
Mm.
And so they only have now, and you got to consider the DeSantis Republicans that are not going to go for Trump, the Haley Republicans that are not going for Trump, and the Republicans who have not felt like they've had a political home since 2016. These people
Right?
finally have a home in the Democratic Party. We've talked about it. We've gone in big tent mode. We've gone so far as making some of our most treasured members of the Democratic Party feel left out. And so we're going to get those votes in certain states, right? They also have marijuana's on the ballot, and so is abortion, and that's Florida, right? But jumping back to Ohio, you have ballot referendums there that have already been successful favoring Democrats, right? If I'm correct, Ohio already passed a ballot referendum on weed.
They did.
And abortion, I believe. And so while those things won't be on the ballot to drive people to the polls, I do believe that the hate coming out from the Haitian immigrants, all of that is what's going to drive people to the polls. That example of blatant racism playing out in Ohio, I think is what's going to drive well-intentioned white voters to the polls and the entire Haitian electorate in Ohio.
Yes.
People that may have not voted just because they're just getting used to being here. They're getting used to our culture.
Right.
Settled in. Maybe they haven't figured out how to go to register. You know what I'm saying? But now they do.
Right.
Right. I do believe that that's what's going to drive it out. And, in the same way that I have said it is silly to count out a historically swing state, I said that about Florida, right? In 2016, when Trump won Florida, he only won it by 3%. However, in 2016, when Trump won Arizona, he won it by 4%, and Biden flipped it in 2020.
Right.
So it's possible. And the margins, again, they were wider for Ohio, but the polling is, the polling's showing that it's very much possible. Democrats just have to get in there. That's a part of the country that people, they want to be talked to. They want someone to come and campaign. You got to go meet them in the diners and at their house, on their front porches. You have to campaign there.
I agree. 100% agree with you. I would not have said that we could possibly flip Ohio until the whole migrant thing happened. And I have people that live in Ohio who have said the same sentiments that you did because they're there. They're boots on the ground there. And they're just like, I don't see. I'm cautiously optimistic because I would like to see Ohio, Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada go blue. I don't think Nevada's going to go blue.
I think
But Clark County is a big county, and I I think people forget that. And Clark County is a very progressive county.
Right.
Clark County, I believe, is where Las Vegas is.
I do. I have a lot of faith in just the West, right? Like Western culture is very much, Nevada, Arizona. I mean, of course, it changes once you get to California, but Utah, New Mexico is very mind your own damn business, right? Like those are states that you need to mind your own business in. And, they went for Biden. And I don't see people who were enthusiastic about Biden not being enthusiastic about Kamala. What do you think about that?
I agree. Actually, I think everyone who was very enthusiastic about Biden have become, I feel, even more enthusiastic about Kamala. I have seen some sentiments of I'm very angry that they forced Biden out, which
Yeah,
I understand.
right,
But I haven't seen a lot of she's worse than Biden.
right.
Like, I haven't seen a Biden supporter go, she's worse than Biden, I'm not going to vote for her. If anything, what I've seen a lot of people who said, I don't think I want to vote for Biden, say, I think I'm voting for Kamala now.
Yes,
So I've seen that.
yes,
But I have not seen, I agree with you, I have not seen a lot of Biden people saying, oh, I'm not going to vote for Kamala.
right.
And I think one of the reasons why is she's vice president. And so you were going to vote for her anyway. If you were voting for Biden, you were still going to vote for her.
Well,
Except instead of her being vice president, she's now going to be president.
right. And there was never bad blood between them. You know what I'm saying? It was
No.
never, and I think that's as evidenced by her really coming into her own since he stepped down. We've really gotten to see her personality, and that showed how subdued she was in service to Biden, right? And that's something I've
Hmm.
thought of, and I've heard also people say that out of respect for Biden, because he's endorsed her and because she was such a strong supporter of him, they're going to vote for her no matter, she's earned that vote already, right? And I think
Hmm.
now that she is, someone said the other day, who was it? And it's someone we don't even like. Kristen Walker on NBC. You know that journalist,
Hmm.
Kirsten Walker.
Hmm.
Kamala's favorability rating right now is no candidate has seen this since George Bush post 9/11. And that says
And let me
something.
tell y'all,
That says
that says a
something.
lot.
That says a lot. And it also says a lot coming out of the mouth of Kristen Walker. She's not known
And
to be a person who loves who loves Democrats. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, she's, Anyway, I'm gonna be quiet. Uh, you're absolutely right. And for people who may have been too young with Bush post 9/11, who maybe wasn't in politics or maybe was too young, you were in elementary school, you were a kid. There were a lot of black people that voted for Bush
I
post
know.
9/11.
I know.
Just I just want y'all to know that he had everybody. He had everybody. He didn't have me. I didn't vote for him, but he had a lot of people.
He didn't have me, and he didn't have my parents, but what he did earn was the respect of my parents. And when I started to talk crap about George Bush during his second term, they said, don't speak ill of the president. We don't do that. We respect the office of the presidency. And I was doing it in a way that wasn't, at that
Hmm.
time, respectability politics were a part of what we grew up with,
Yep.
and whether it's the nostalgia of that time of what I think some of us could refer to as peace, like here in the States among ourselves anyway, in the
Right.
culture, we know what that means when you say you have the favorability rating likened to George Bush,
Right.
and that speaks volumes. And so I know what, and I want to mention, earlier I alluded to the fact that I want us to move away from a space where we no longer have to predict, where we no longer have to, compare politicians to Donald Trump. I don't even think Kamala Harris is comparable. Like she's not, it's not, I'm not voting for her just because she's not Donald Trump. I like her. Like I support her policies. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And I believe that she's 100 million times better and she's earned that spot. You know what I'm saying? And so I just want to clear that up if anyone was thinking that. But I think she'll win Nevada. I really do. Earning in Nevada, here's one thing that people may not know. The food service workers union is everything.
Yep.
In Nevada.
It absolutely
and they
is.
were the first to endorse. They were one of the first to endorse Kamala. And so, when she earned that endorsement, I told my husband, and he works in restaurant, he's a chef, right? And while he's not a part of that union here, he said, well, that's it. She's won that, right? She's won Nevada because of that. Also, Democrats have made huge inroads with the Latino community in Nevada. We also elected Cortez Masto, and she's done a lot of good work for Nevadans, and I think that will really help Kamala in Nevada. But that's just me, right? But my map if we want to jump into electoral maps for the federal election, right now I'm at 350 in favor of Kamala. I have Kamala winning 350 electoral votes. If we want to go down the little blue wall, Washington, I have her winning Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado. I have Utah going red, but I believe that Democrats are going to make inroads with the Mormons in Utah. Because of the Mormon support, but I'm still keeping it red just because it's Utah.
It's Utah,
right?
And it's Mormon,
right? Also, Hawaii going blue. I still have Alaska going red, right?
Right.
But jumping over and just to spend a little bit of time on Texas, I want everyone to know and hear me when I say this. I trust the electorate in Texas to flip the state blue, but I do not trust the government to certify those results. I do not.
And there we get to another issue, states certifying their results. That's part of understanding the assignment, folks. It's not about getting Chuck Taylors or wearing pink and green.
Or a hashtag.
And FYI, you can wear pink and green. Pink and green you can wear. You cannot wear them to an AKA function because you're not unless you're a member of AKA.
Right.
You cannot wear AKA insignia, which means anything with AKA on it, unless you're AKA. If you're not a member of the AKA, you can't be wearing AKA things. And these are for people who ain't never been in a sorority. For the white people that have been in a white sorority, I believe the rules still apply. So those rules that apply to your white sorority apply to the black one too.
Right.
Now, ain't nobody said you can't wear pink and green. I wear pink and green sometimes. It doesn't have AKA insignia on it, but I wear it, and I don't wear it to an AKA function. But, that's not understanding the assignment. Understanding the assignment is understanding some of these states aren't going to certify their vote.
Right. Now, where I have a little, I have faith in all of the different counties in Arizona to certify those results. No, but we have a Democratic governor, a Democratic attorney general, and a Democratic secretary of state. So I have faith in that, right?
Right.
And our attorney general has already let any fake electors know by indicting the ones from 2020.
And that's how you let people know you're not to be trifled with, which is why I don't really understand why the U.S. government is sitting on certain congressmen and senators, because you can't tell me that some of those congressmen and senators weren't in on January 6th too. Yeah. But they're still Congress. They're still sitting members of Congress. They're still there. I think Merrick Garland was made to be a Supreme Court judge. I do not think he was made to be
the Attorney General.
What is he, Secretary of? And I feel like one of the things that's really getting in the way is, like your parents said, we don't disrespect the office of the president. I feel like that sentiment of not disrespecting the office of the president or not disrespecting Congress of the House and the Senate is getting in the way of you need to investigate these people and punish them by due process. And the
Absolutely.
reason why, when you don't do it, people think it's okay to do it. It's
Yeah.
not disrespectful for you to go after a former president for stealing documents and trying to instigate an insurrection and trying to
Right.
steal an election. You are disrespecting the office of the president when you don't do it. You're not
Right.
disrespecting the
Or
off. You're not disrespecting.
or when you go after their kids, or you go after a president with no evidence. Let's bring up. I mean, these sham impeachment trials against President Biden. You know, that's how you disrespect the office, right? Some could disrespect the office by going after a president for smoking weed and getting his dick sucked, but that's another conversation.
That's a whole nother conversation because you dig into a lot of stuff with that. You dig into a lot of stuff with that, but you don't disrespect Congress by not holding these people accountable. They're disrespecting Congress by still having a seat there. Trump has disrespected the office of the president because he stole classified documents and he sold them. If y'all don't think he didn't
And not only
sell
that, but
anything.
the selling of that, not only did it endanger national security, but it also got a lot of our spies killed.
Yep.
We've had foreign spies. And the thing is nobody can talk about it more than maybe one or two articles because that endangers nationals. Like, what do you say other than, oh,
Exactly.
Russians killed American spies, right? And so,
Exactly.
you know, and also his inaction and botched job of withdrawing from the Middle East and allowing Iran, in a whole other instance, allowing Iran to kill 17 of our soldiers. He gave Iran the green light to bomb one of our embassies or one of our bases over.
And you wonder why all of these military leaders, Republican military leaders, are walking around going, y'all don't want this man back in office.
Right.
And I'm not voting for him, and you don't want him back in office.
Right.
Because some of them have seen some things. Some of them have willingly, I think we talked about this when we had Christopher on, they willingly didn't tell him things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Imagine having
Joint Chiefs.
Imagine having a president.
Yeah.
Right. Imagine having a president where you can't tell them things like, oh, we got to keep this from him.
Yeah. 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 And, you know, it's also worth mentioning that over 400 security officers from the Reagan administration, from both Bush administrations, from the Clinton administration, the Obama, every administration except Trump have said to vote for Kamala Harris. It's a matter of national security, is what they've said, you know.
And I think we're gonna get some of those Republicans because you know you have some Republicans they did military service.
Yes.
They may have made a career out of the military. They sit there and go, oh, I can't vote for him because those people were right. He sat there and you know fucked us up.
Yeah.
I can't vote for this person. We're going to have a lot of those
people. Want to talk about that? I mean, I just remembered, you know, I have a cousin, and we talk, you know, maybe 2-3 times a year, you know, but he's former military. He lives in Ohio. Just moved there. He works for, and now he works for Lockheed Martin. But he's voting Democrat. You know what I'm saying? And so, and then a couple of friends I have there, you know, inroads are being made, right? And that. I don't know a military person. I mean, my family's military, and I have friends that are military, but I don't know one that's voting for Trump.
Well, I have family who military. My family has been in the military that I could document, that I could find since World War II.
Yeah.
Starting with my grandpa.
Right.
He was in World War II. Then I've had family in every major war since World War II, from World War II to Afghanistan, and not one of them people is voting for Trump.
Yeah.
If they're alive.
Right.
The people that are alive, aren't voting for Trump.
Well,
The people who were dead wasn't going to vote for him anyway.
Two or 3 years ago, me and Nate flew to Texas to meet my brother and meet my family and everything. And my brother is a Navy man, right? Who, up until 2016 was a self-proclaimed libertarian, right? And when we went, he's got 2 daughters, right? Both of them who have just come out as members of the LGBT community. One of his daughters says she's a lesbian. One's bisexual. And we got on the topic of Trump, and our grandfather, our great grandfather, our uncles served in every war from, like you said, from World War II. Back then it was World War II, Korea, Vietnam,
Vietnam.
And then my granddaddy was a chaplain, and he was in Libya, Egypt, and also Korea and Vietnam, but he went into parts of Libya and Egypt when we were, teaching them how to drill for oil back in the 60s and 70s. Me and my brother were discussing that, and I said, our family fought these people, fought these fascist people, right? And I said, and he said, don't worry, I'm not voting for Trump. You don't have to worry about that,
Right. And I think in my grandfather's case, he kind of did it under duress because I believe he was drafted.
Okay, fair enough.
So I don't think he wanted to go, which I don't blame him. We're talking about World War II had segregated army units, and he was in the army. So I don't blame him one minute for not wanting to go, but he went and he did his 2 years because he was only in for 2 years, but it was enough for him to get a military funeral. It was enough for him to get VA benefits.
Right.
So he did his 2 years and he came out. I have a cousin who made his entire career the military. He was in Desert Storm for the Air Force and made his entire career military, and he had a very good career in it. So whether we did it under duress or not, we have always fought, like you said, we fought fascists. Ain't no way we gonna vote for one, and Trump is a fascist.
Yeah.
Trump is a fascist. He's a fascist.
And I know that I know he has support among military. I don't want to think that.
Absolutely he does.
I know he does. And, the reasons for that's a whole nother episode. You know what I'm saying? That's a whole nother episode.
It really is.
A whole nother topic. You know what I'm saying? That's not even politics, right? Why he has that support. But it's a small portion. It's a very small portion of people. And that's why, again, there's so many legal schemes to steal this election systemically.
Yes.
But, jumping back to the map, I believe Florida will flip. I believe Georgia will flip as well. And I think we can thank a combination of Stacey Abrams, the continued work or the work that Reverend Warnock has built on, right? Because he campaigns in that state. He spends time in his state. He's not just a senator that spends all his time in Washington. And the Kamala Harris effect, Georgia, the suburbs of Atlanta, especially, whether they're white or black, those educated suburban people do not want Donald Trump, and they want their reproductive rights. And we've already talked about North Carolina. I believe that flips. I believe that Virginia and Pennsylvania and the rest of the East Coast goes for Kamala as well. And when we jump over to Minnesota, I believe Minnesota flips. I believe Wisconsin flips, or not flips, but I believe Minnesota goes blue. I believe Wisconsin goes blue. Illinois, no problem. And I believe Michigan. That brings her to 350. Right?
Which is those.
Yeah, and that's also counting Nebraska's first congressional district going for her as well. And that's counting the entire state of Maine. I don't even have a congressional district in Maine going for Trump. And the reason being is he's pulled out campaigning. He's no longer campaigning in Maine, New Hampshire, and there's one other state, I think Maryland. He's no longer campaigning in.
Well, he ain't getting Maryland. I'm just telling y'all right now.
He was going to get any of those people anyway. The Republicans who voted for him out of those eastern states in 2016 are constitutional Republicans. You know what I mean? And they're very much going to vote for Kamala because they respect the office of the presidency. And January 6th was just a step too far for them. You know what I mean? That's those people,
Oh, absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
but I do want to say, I have Ohio red on this map and I have Iowa red on this map, but I believe there's potential for both of them to flip. I also want to say that I believe that we could see some surprises coming out of Missouri, and I believe we could see a surprise coming out of Kansas, because those are both states that have abortion on the ballot, and those
All
are
right.
states that Democrats have put some money in. So,
And I would love to hear what our viewers have to say. This will be on YouTube. Comments will be open. So I would like for our viewers to comment on what you think, which states are going to flip, which states aren't. We're going to put the map or where you can find the map in our show notes. Brandon, it's been great.
yes,
And I agree with you. I agree with you with all your predictions. I think all of those are going to happen. I also think that Angela also Brooks for Maryland will win the Senate over Larry Hogan. And I'm currently residing in Maryland. I can't vote in Maryland. I'll still be voting in the District of Columbia, but I am currently residing in Maryland. Temporarily, and I think Angela has it.
absolutely.
I think Angela has it in the bag.
In this prediction, before we wrap up, I just want to say I would be remiss if I didn't mention, Alan Lichtman has already predicted that Kamala Harris will win. I'm
Right.
a fan of Alan, follow his work, and he's never been wrong. So, but also just to say, to be that annoying person that I talk about, you got to vote. Register to vote, vote early, vote in person if you can, and make a plan. Like Michelle Obama always says, make a plan to
Yes.
make a plan to
And
vote.
check your voter and also check your voter registration. I don't really have a problem. I'm voting in DC is so blue it's not even funny. So I don't have a problem with that, and no one is trying to stop me from voting. But if you live in a state where they are actively trying to stop you from voting, check your voter registration. If you moved somewhere recently, see if you can vote in that state and make sure that the deadline has passed for you to register to vote in that state, especially if it's a toss-up state or a red state. So check your voter registration. I think that is very, very important to do that. And I think it's something that we kind of take for granted. I know I do, being in a blue state. I don't check that because
Right. And I've never really worried about it either. I've checked mine more often now because, it's just a smart thing to do, but it's always
it's a smart thing to do.
check it. It's not something I
Right.
really worry about.
But, check your voter registration. I believe Georgia, North Carolina, Texas have been actively throwing people off the rolls.
Yeah.
So make sure you check your voter registration. Make sure you vote. Make sure that you vote in your local elections. Make sure you vote for your U.S. Senate and your U.S. Congressman. When you vote for your U.S. Senator and your U.S. Congressman, you are also voting for people who could possibly have a say in what almost 700,000 people get to do with their budget. And those 700,000 people are residents of the District of Columbia. We are not a state. We do not have control over our budget. Congress has control over our budget. So when you vote for your congressman and vote for your senators, keep that in mind, that your congressman or senator could be on that committee that decides what 700,000 people who pay taxes gets to do with their tax dollars.
Right. And not just, and it's also Puerto Rico too, right? It's DC
and Puerto Rico.
Right.
Puerto Rico. Because they also get to decide what Puerto Rico does with their tax dollars.
Is at the DNC. They, they are there. They are active.
Wait, does Puerto Rico pay taxes though?
Let's see. Thank God we have Google.
I know that DC pays taxes, but I want to say Puerto Rico does not. But I don't want.
Yeah, they pay federal.
Well, yeah, they're paying federal taxes.
It includes Social Security, Medicare, and unemployment taxes.
And we pay federal taxes too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, when y'all vote, make sure you vote locally. Make sure you vote statewide, and be mindful that there are people that live in places that may not want to move to a state or don't want to move to a state, that, who you elect determines what happens to us. And I'm going to end it on that. Brandon, it's been wonderful.
Yes, always.
It's been wonderful. Guys, you've heard another episode of I Got a Lot of Things to Say. I'm your host, Kea Dodson. That's Brandon, our co-host, and we'll catch you later on another episode.
Bye.